pleased to be here to set out our response to the proposals the government is making for reforming the welfare and pensions system. Then, we lost the general election, we lost it badly, we need to be frank about that, and we need to build now a new and compelling proposition to put to voters at the next election. I think it's very important that in the party and the union we're working very closely together to make sure we get this right. We've just been hearing how the new government is stamping its mark on public services in no uncertain terms. I've got to say, in quite a lot of areas, the government does not appear to have a grip. In health, for example, we've just been hearing about from Tom and John at Prime Minister's Questions this week. David Cameron appeared not to know what is in his health bill. And at quite a lot of places, you just get the sense that there isn't a grip on what is going on. So today I want to talk about big-scale changes being made to the welfare systems and changes to the pension system, state pension system as well. They're going to have huge implications. And we've got to be frank at the start, it is the case, it is clear, reform is needed. We don't dispute the need for change. But it's got to be change that's been properly thought through with a proper assessment of what it's going to do, particularly for its impact on people who are not well off in the first place. Pensions, first of all, there's a need for reform of the pension system. People are living longer. We will have, over time, to work for longer, and the state pension age, as we said in government, will need to rise. I think it's also important that there's a political consensus about those changes. So in government we took the time with the Turner Commission review, Jeannie Drake playing a very important part in that, to build a plan for reform which all parties in the House of Commons could sign up to, and the measures that came out of that are being taken forward by the new government. Pension Act of 2007, we committed to increase the state pension age for men and women, which of course will be the same by 2020 on our plans, to go up to 66 by 2026, 67 by 2036, 68 by 2046. So everybody had at least 20 years notice under those announcements of the changes that were ahead. New government, Tory-led, decided to speed up the plan. The coalition agreement said the government would review the date at which the state pension would rise, but they pledged that it would be not be sooner than 2016 for men, 2024 women. Well, that pledge has been torn up already. They published draft legislation to bring forward the equalisation of the pension age to 2018, and then to increase both to 66 by 2020. And for a particular group of women, those born between the 6th of December 1953 and the 5th of October 1954, the state pension age for them is going to increase by more than 18 months. And in some cases, and it is now clear, this is a straightforward bungle on the part of the government. They just didn't do their homework, they botched this. It means that a significant number of women are going to have to wait an extra 2 years for their pension. A woman born in April 1953 will be able to receive her state pension just before she reaches 63. Somebody born a year later will have to wait 3 years longer. They won't get their state pension until they're 66. The truth is, this is a mess, as well as being very clearly unfair. Now, a lot of those women are just a few years away from what they were told by a previous Conservative government was going to be their state pension age. Many have already reduced their work hours in preparation for retirement or taken on caring responsibilities, and it simply is not fair to expect them now, at very short notice, to tear up their plans, work for 2 years longer, even if there were ample jobs around for them to go back to. And the question is, why should this particular group of women have to pay so heavy a price for government miscalculation? My colleague Rachel Reeves, our pension spokesperson, has proposed yes, an acceleration of the timetable for increasing the state pension age for both men and women, 65 to 66. She's suggesting between 2020 and 2022. Now, if we did that, the number of people affected would be over 1 million fewer than under government plans, an equal number of men and women. Nobody would suffer an increase in their state pension age of more than a year, and nobody would be affected before 2020. But that would still deliver about £20 billion worth of savings, 2/3 of what the government plans, a much fairer way forward, and that's what we shall be arguing for as the pensions bill goes through Parliament in the coming weeks. But I'm particularly engaged on the much bigger reform that's been announced of the welfare system. And last week we had the second reading of the welfare reform bill, and in my speech I told the House of Commons this bill contains one good idea and two very big problems. The good idea is universal credit, the merger of out-of-work benefits, job seeker allowance, income support, incapacity benefit, with in-work benefits, the tax credits that we introduced, which went such a long way in making it worthwhile being in a job. Those are going to be replaced by this single universal credit, so that in future, if you get a job, instead of having to apply for a new benefit, your existing benefit will simply have to be recalculated, and that should make it easier to move from welfare to work, potentially could simplify the system. And those are good objectives which we have supported. It's clear the Prime Minister sees this as his flagship measure. The logic to do away with complexity, single benefit, single taper rate, for every extra pound earned, 65 pence of benefits, if you're still receiving the benefit of that level of earnings, would be lost, 35 pence would be kept. The government says many people will be incentivised to enter work and then to increase their hours, and the benefit system will get real-time PAYE data on the amount of income everybody receives each month to allow benefit to be automatically adjusted, and in theory that will do away with the tax credit overpayment problem we've had in the past. Now I say in theory because in fact, of course, this is going to require a vast new IT system connecting up different government departments, every local authority in the country, every employer in the country. And extraordinarily, I think, in the Green Paper in the summer, the government said, and I quote, "This will not constitute a major IT project." I mean, that is an absolutely absurd claim. This is going to be the biggest IT project ever. And there's absolutely no point in them being in denial about it. Universal credit is a good idea, but they've oversold it. The number of people out of work benefits fell between 1997 and 2008 by 1 million. It only rose again because of the recession. The central problem is not with the work shy, it's with the work less. And we all know, as a result of government cuts, according to the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, 1.6 million jobs are going to be lost by 2015-16. I'm afraid no amount of extra work incentives are going to make up for that. So universal credit, in principle, a good idea, but alongside that there are two big problems, and the first of them is the huge gaps in this bill. The bill was introduced a month late. Before it was published, it was rumoured that it was going to be delayed by another month to give them time to make some pretty big policy decisions. And now we've seen the bill, we can see the problem. This simply has not been completed. We've no idea at all at the moment what support the government will offer to parents in future for childcare. For a lot of parents, that is absolutely key to whether or not they can work. Under the system that we introduced, parents working over 16 hours a week can receive up to 97% of the cost of childcare through tax credits and housing benefit and council tax benefit, so they end up paying 3% of the cost. Now, this government wants to extend childcare help to people working less than 16 hours a week. The amount of extra money they're going to provide to pay for that is zero, nothing at all. So it looks as though future support could be 70% of the cost of childcare, with parents picking up 30%. That is to say 10 times as much under this proposal as they have to pick up at the moment. So it's no wonder that lone parent organisations are starting to get calls from their members saying they're going to have to give up work as a result. What is the government's answer? What are they going to do about all this? We simply do not know. The bill does not say how they are going to support the costs of childcare in the future, or how much support they will provide. And it looks as though they simply have not yet decided. Another unknown is council tax benefit. All the different benefits, and I've said we support this, are being brought together into this single universal credit. But the government has taken the bizarre decision that council tax benefit, they're going to do the opposite with that, and devolve it entirely to local councils. And this seems to be the outcome of a messy dispute between Ian Duncan Smith on the one hand and Eric Pickles on the other, who's desperately trying to find things to do to make some reality to his rhetoric about localism, and he's decided that giving them council tax benefit is the answer. So Ian Duncan Smith appears to be losing this dispute, but we don't really know what the outcome is. So we're going to have a not quite universal credit, plus a separate council tax benefit, which local authorities will apparently be free to design as they wish, except that it's going to cost 10% less than it cost before. And it may well be, depending on how local councils design these schemes, and there will be a different scheme in every local authority in the country, that it could completely scupper all of the advantages, the single taper and so on, which universal credit is supposed to deliver. This bill is a mess. These things are supposed to be sorted out before the bill gets published. Actually, the bill had a second reading last week, and we still have no idea what they're going to do. And the same goes for a whole load of other unknowns. What is going to happen about passported benefits, like free school meals and free school and free prescriptions? At the moment, they depend on receiving benefits which are about to be abolished. So who's going to get them in the future? No idea. What's going to happen to the self-employed who are not even PAYE? How is their credit going to be worked out? No idea. Who's going to be entitled to mortgage interest support in the future? Which working families are going to be exempted from this benefit cap they've announced? How is unearned income, like child maintenance, widow's benefit, going to be treated? Will disability living allowance continue to be available for children? Crucial questions that we simply do not know the answers to. And they're not just minor details. The government says this bill is to make sure you're always better off in work. But how they answer those questions, and particularly the question on childcare, is going to determine whether or not that is achieved. Today, we simply do not know what they are going to do. So the first big problem is all the things we do not know in this bill. The second problem, unfortunately, is even worse, and that is all the things we do know. Because the broad principle of universal credit is right, but the government is using this opportunity to make £18 billion a year in cuts, and the result is draconian and unfair cuts. Contributory employment and support allowance for those in the work-related activity group is going to be time limited to a year. And what that is going to mean that a lot of people with health problems are going to have their benefits stopped completely if they haven't found work within 12 months. Now, the evidence for that change simply is not there. Probably at the moment, fewer than 20% of people who go into that work-related activity group get back into work within a year. We don't know precisely what the figure is. We've asked the government that question. They haven't given us an answer. But for example, people on oral chemotherapy, people who've had a serious mental health problem, many of those people are in the work-related activity group. There is no way they can be expected to get back to work within a year. But perhaps the most extraordinary feature of this bill, though, is an astonishing attack on saving. In means-tested, out-of-work benefits, it's always been the case that you don't receive any benefit if you've got more than £16,000 in savings. But the government has now decided that this rule should apply in future to people who are in work as well. That is, people who at the moment are perhaps receiving £80, £100 a week to supplement their income through tax credits. In future, if they've got £16,000 in the bank, they've got £1,000 in the bank, they will get nothing at all. They could lose £5,000 a year. Depending on how they deal with childcare, it's entirely likely that they will lose all of their childcare support as well, because the punishment for having £16,000 in savings. What does the government have against saving? Why are people on modest incomes to be penalised viciously for saving for a deposit to buy a home, or saving up to contribute towards their children's higher education, the costs of which have been trebled, or a lot of people who maybe had an accident, a road traffic accident, who've been awarded some compensation, that's in the bank. If it's there, they lose everything under these proposals. Ian Duncan Smith in the House of Commons told us this wasn't a big problem because only 100,000 people were going to be affected. Well, I mean, I told him he should go and talk to the people who work in the think tank he set up, the Centre for Social Justice. Their report, Dynamic Benefits, laid a lot of the groundwork for the universal credit. And their report says the existing savings rules in means-tested benefit are, and I quote, an unfair penalty on those who have saved. But instead of scrapping them, as they advised, the bill extends them for the first time to people who are in work. The consequences of that are going to be immense. Disability living allowance, another enormous worry. It's being scrapped. It's being replaced with the personal independence payment, whatever that might eventually turn out to be. Disabled people are completely understandably very frightened about this change. The government was consulting on the future of disability living allowance, and then before the consultation ended, they published the bill which announces its abolition. And there are other big concerns in the bill as well, changes to the shared room rate, new under occupancy rules, have got the potential to cause huge hardship. For all the Conservatives have said about the couples penalty, the new benefit cap is going to create a far bigger couples penalty than we've ever had before. And despite the purpose of universal credit being to make work pay, the government has now admitted that marginal deduction rates, the rate at which people lose their benefit and pay tax when they increase their working hours, is actually going to go up for more people than it's going to come down as a result of these changes. And another problem is this: the government is throwing the benefit system into turmoil with these proposals at exactly the point when they're axing the funding for welfare advice. Now, it is absolutely crucial that there is decent advice available when these changes take effect, because otherwise there's going to be chaos. So, universal credit, good idea in principle, wide support, but too many crucial details are still unknown. They haven't been able to make up their minds, and too many details that we do know, frankly, we wish we didn't. The bill goes into committee next week. Welfare reform has got to be done properly. It mustn't be botched in the way that this is clearly being, because otherwise, if it carries on like this, it's going to be the least well off who get clobbered. And we're going to be doing everything we can over the next few weeks to put these very, very serious problems right. So the Tory-led government taking decisions that would be hugely damaging to a lot of vulnerable people, and as well limit the aspirations of many, many trade unionists and others who are working very hard. But the biggest mistake the government is making is the size and scale of its cuts. Without those, we could chart a more sensible, fairer course of reform. The government's apparently independent Office for Budget Responsibility says that in the coming financial year, there'll be a reduction of 60,000 in the number of public sector jobs in the UK. The Tory-led Association of Local Government says there will be 100,000 jobs lost just in local council, let alone all the jobs we've been hearing about being lost in the health service and the rest of the public sector. And there's absolutely no sign of the private sector jobs boom, which is supposed to make up the difference. So that in the coming months is the case we're going to have to take to the country. There are tough choices to be made, but there is an alternative to the cuts that George Osborne is preparing. We need proper reform, properly worked out, planned so it doesn't clobber those who are already being hit the hardest. But above all, what we need is a different economic strategy. The alternative we're all going to be marching for next weekend, a strategy for growth to give us the jobs that we desperately, desperately need. Thank you very much.
James Lepford, Prospect Trade Union. I'd just like to ask, will Ed Elizabeth be joining us at the march?
I've no idea. I can say that I certainly will be, and I expect a very large number of my parliamentary colleagues to be there. Whether Ed is, I'm not sure.
He will be. He'll be speaking at the march. Any questions on the issues that Stephen's just addressed? Yeah.
Actually, it's not on the issue. My name is Dominic Brown from Left Foot Forward. And the massive rate of unemployment at the moment, do you expect or can you predict anything George Osborne might put in the budget to help relieve unemployment levels?
Well, I'm not holding my breath for anything that's going to make very much difference, at least in the short term. I think we'll just have to wait and see. There's speculation about enterprise zones and things like that, which I don't think were terribly effective last time they were tried. I mean, I think there is a huge worry about the prospects for employment over the next few months. I mean, the theory all along, and the Office for Budget Responsibility and Predictions, is, yeah, the public sector will shed jobs, but the private sector will dramatically increase jobs, and we just are not seeing those new jobs being created at the moment. And from the people I speak to running businesses, it's not going to happen anytime soon. You know, the banks, for example, are not lending to the kind of businesses. I was talking to a small business in my constituency this morning that wants to expand, but they can't get support from the banks to enable them to do so. So, I mean, you know, this deal that Osborne has done with the banks seems to have been a complete damn squib. There's nothing that businesses can see coming forward changes from the bank's attitude as a result of that. And so I think the prospects for employment in the next 2-3 years as the public sector job cuts hit us is a very, very, very worrying one indeed.
Yeah, one over that side.
Hi, it's not a question as such. My name is Miranda, I'm a GMB member. It's just to say thank you for all the passion you exhibited in that speech. It's just so nice to hear. That's the first speech I've heard from a shadow Labour minister since you went into opposition, and it's fantastic. So just good luck with all your work and keep going. It's really good to hear.
Very kind of you. Thank you very much. Let me just make the point that as opposition continues, we are getting plenty to feel passionate about what they're doing. So lots of where that came from. Thank you for your very kind remark.
Okay, there's two here. If we take these as the final two, and we'll take them both together and let you answer them, please.
Hi, Andy Mallard from CSP. Stephen, I met you once before at an End Child Poverty campaign annual meeting, and I know how important that campaign was to the Labour government and the significant, albeit smaller than hoped for, improvements. It must surely now be under the most serious jeopardy. And do you get any sense from Osborne and Cameron that they have any thought for the proportion of children that they will force to live in poverty over the next few years?
Okay, thank you. We'll take this final point as well.
Christina Shosoyan from Union of General Volunteer Workers. Will Labour be able to effectively help in trying to block the review of flexible working working opportunity for people with children? Because I would say we're talking about the level of unemployment at the moment. It will easily rise when that one comes in, because the cost of having to arrange for somebody to look after your children and doing so much is not within the reach of common people. And for the government to actually take away the leeway they have in having to have flexible arrangements so that they can cover both their childcare responsibility and work, and to take that one away is really very wicked, I would say.
Thank you.
And just point about child poverty. I mean, we made as you rightly say, significant progress on child poverty in government. We didn't get as far as we hoped that we would. But actually, I mean, particularly when you compare what happened in the UK on child poverty with what was happening in other countries in Europe and around the world, we did well. The government, as it is now, the opposition then, supported our Child Poverty Act, which I took through Parliament, which put on the statute book the target of reducing income measured child poverty to less than 10% by 2020. That is the law. Now, how are they going to do it? Well, they've recently published for consultation what they claimed was a strategy on child poverty. It was the thinnest, most pathetic document I've ever seen. A few pages thrown together without any strategic content at all. And to answer your question, no, I don't think they've got the faintest intention of doing anything about delivering on those targets. I mean, George Osborne, when he introduced his budget, very proudly boasted that it wasn't going to make child poverty worse, which isn't true. It is going to make, his budget is going to make child poverty worse. And I'm afraid the prospects there are pretty grim. The last Tory government tripled child poverty in the UK. We brought it down. I'm afraid I think it's going to go back up again. Now, how are they going to sort out the problem of what the law says for 2020? I'm not sure, but I guess the truth is they're not going to worry too much about that for the next 5 years. There'll be a problem for further down the road. But I do think the End Child Poverty Coalition did a great job, and we need to highlight just the scale of rising child poverty again in the UK as the figures become apparent. We are, I think, in the next month or so, maybe 2 months, going to get fresh child poverty data which will cover the end of our term in government, and I think that is going to show us further significant fall that we achieved at the end of government, but after that my guess is it's going to go up again. Can we do anything to deal with this review of flexible working that the government has been talking about? And the strength of your point, I think, is increased by what we think is going to happen to childcare support. People with childcare tax credits at the moment, I think, are going to see their support much, much reduced in the future, so that the importance of having flexibility is going to be even greater. So we will do everything we can in the House of Commons and in the House of Lords to prevent the kind of changes the government has in mind. But of course, in the end, we don't have the numbers. It's going to take the re-election of a Labour government for us to sort these things out. But rest assured, we're going to do everything we can to fight them in the next few months.
Stephen, thank you very much.